Well, hi again, and welcome to Coffee with Craig. I'm your host, Craig Hamilton Parker, and I'm a psychic medium. And today we'll be doing quite a few things. I'll be giving you some psychic readings about what I feel is happening in the world. I'll give you some predictions, and we'll have an interesting exploration of the spiritual nature of what's happening in the world around us today. So, welcome to Coffee with Craig. Well, hi again, and it's good to see you. Don't forget, if you like this show, always please give it a thumbs up when you come here because it helps the algorithm to push it up that listing. And if you're here for the first time, don't forget to subscribe because you'll be able to join our little community here. Because around all these questions and comments, you seed your questions and you seed your ideas, and it becomes a very, very interesting little community that we've got here. Now, I've been changing the way I do the show gradually, and do let me know what you think about it. I'm breaking it up into smaller sections, which we're going to show all of them today, and you'll be able to comment on those and see some of my insights for the world, where I think things are going. Some of them are things about what's going on in the world today. Others, a few questions about the spirit things and spiritual questions that I answer for that you've posted. I hope it's a good mix. Hope you enjoy it. There's a bit here also with a little talk with Jane as well, my wife Jane, who's also a medium, if you don't know. Yeah, so it's a good little show, I hope, and I hope you enjoy it. So let's get on with the first little section now. Well, the next question up is all about the Epstein business again and the birthday card release and Elaine Maxwell and things like that. So let me just read you the question sent in. This is one that's been sent in by one of our patrons. So I'm taking the questions one at a time. So this is what she has to say about this one. It says, is Trump going to survive the Epstein birthday card? The female form looks young and the secret is a little sketchy, but his signature is unmistakable. No matter how it's spun, it isn't good. And will he pardon Ghislaine Maxwell? Okay, so this is my psychic reading of the situation, as it were, and I'll give you some of my insights, maybe a few predictions as we go along as well. So, okay, so here we are dealing with a birthday card. I mean, those of you that been watching the news obviously know it's the 50th birthday card collection that was released as a batch of documents recently. Epstein killed himself, I think it was in 2019 now, but it's only just being released. Just shows how much time it takes for these things to surface. And I think this is one of the key issues with this, about what's going to happen with this, is the timing, because I feel that what's going to happen is the lawyers are going to kick this down the road and kick it down the road and down the road. And I don't think we're going to see any conclusion to any of this very soon. But obviously people are speculating about what it all means. And Trump, of course, has now filed I think it's 10 billion defamation lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal over this, and absolutely categorically denies it. So what's my feeling about it? Well, it all does look a bit suspect to me. It's almost like too much of a gift in many ways. Would Trump really be that stupid to sign something like that? It's a possibility. I mean, would Andrew be so stupid? And would recently Peter Mandelson be so stupid to get photographed with Epstein and so forth? Obviously, a lot of people are taken in. And, you think about what Epstein would have been like as a person. He kind of must have been a kind of a poisoned friend, wouldn't he? Really, he winds you in a little bit and gets you joking about stuff, and jokes can suddenly turn into a dagger that can destroy your whole career. But my feeling about the whole business is, could they prove it in a court of law? Whatever one might believe one way or the other with this, my feeling is it's not going to get through a court of law. Now, if I was a lawyer or an attorney defending or attacking this case, and we looked at the signature, the first question is going to be, is this signature real? And obviously, when we put them up and compare them to other ones that he's done, the word Donald and things like that, some of the other news outlets have gone into in great depth, there's obviously a lot of similarities, and it could quite easily have been done by the same hand. However, when you're signing with a felt tip pen, that he seems to do with this, there's no nuances in the signature that you could really say this truly identifies it as a correct signature. And particularly since the pen is sort of thicker than probably would have been used normally on his other signatures, on a smaller place like a birthday card like that, I would still highly question it if I was a lawyer. I've studied quite a bit of graphology in the past to read how you can understand a person's characteristics and personality from a signature. I used to write a lot for the newspapers, and that was one of the articles a few times that we used to write about graphology and what it meant and said about this person and that person. More of an analysis, not really a psychic thing. But nonetheless, I would think it's a very, very hard case to prove in a court of law. And this is where I think he will escape any final destructive forces from this, because he will survive it, to answer your question, because I just don't think it can be proved once you get into the court. And then how long does it take to get something into the court in the first place? Obviously, everybody's trying very hard to get it into the court. His enemies are trying to do this, but I suppose from a legal point of view, the best form of defense is attack. So you go on the attack and start suing them for $10 billion, which makes everybody sort of think twice, because we're dealing with big amounts of money here, and we've got to be absolutely sure, can we win this case? I mean, if it was me taking a signature like that into court to try to win a case on that signature, I think it would be very, very dodgy ground. So the way I see it unfolding is they'd eventually probably have to back off, because it's just not strong enough. I mean, whatever you believe, do you believe it or not, is a whole different issue. Do I feel he signed that? I think Trump can do some stupid things, like everybody can do some stupid things, and it could be genuine. The signature could be genuine, but it could easily be faked as well, couldn't it? And those words on it, wonderful secret. Trump does love that word wonderful, doesn't he? And that's a typical word I would associate with him. But that's a word that anybody wanted to fake it up would also associate it with him. So the question is, I just don't think they can prove it, right or wrongs of this case, whether he did it or he didn't. I just don't think it's provable in a court of law. I just don't feel that it'll go the distance, this. But of course, the whole big question about it is what else is there in the archives here? I've said for a long time that my feelings are that there is definitely a list of there is definitely a little black book out there. Whether it's ever going to surface or not, who knows? But my feeling is, I feel it will eventually surface. And in that little black book, there's going to be lots of names that would never have suspected. Like here in the UK now, news is breaking of Lord Mandelson, who is in the in the accusations with Epstein and so forth. Now, Lord Mandelson is part of the Labour government over here. He was also the ambassador, I think it was, to the USA. He's got all entangled in this. He's openly, he's admitted he's a gay person, for example, which is no problem. But what did Epstein have on him? Was he using him somehow? What you're there in swimming trunks and a dressing gown and things like this. What went on there? And of course, Lord Mandelson also You knew Lord Waheed as well, which the press haven't spoken about for some time. Was he perhaps compromised? There's nothing absolutely in the press to show that Lord Waheed was compromised at all. But how far could it spread? I mean, I'm just asking the question here. How far could it spread? How far did Epstein get his claws into people to start manipulating not just individuals, but whole governments? And I feel this is going to have some effect on the Labour government here as well. It won't be their downfall, but it will be, one more nail in the coffin with this. And of course, innocent people getting blackened by just sheer association, of course, as well. So in terms of your question on that, will the birthday card bring him down? No, I don't feel it will, because of the sheer practicalities of it. And so it don't entirely take a psychic to tell you that. But I've been seeing some of this coming, and in some of my other predictions going back, I have been saying that I feel there's a list, and there's more people in this list than we've ever imagined, and it will come out this year, which I've been speaking about too. So I think more's going to come out. Now, would Trump actually pardon Ghislaine Maxwell is the other kind of part of your question there, which I think is also interesting. Now, Trump did talk about this, didn't he? He said that he was allowed to pardon her, so he can do this. But he also added something to the effect, and he said, "But nobody's asked me to do it." I think he said, which means it's almost like a threat to that, isn't it? If somebody asks me to do it, well, maybe I will, maybe I won't. This is typical Trump strategy. This idea of you don't know what I'm going to do keeps everybody at bay, which makes me think in my own mind, as it were, that there is something dodgy out there still, and he's keeping people quiet. If you say something, well, maybe I will pardon her, and God knows what that will be. It might bring me down, but it might bring the rest of you down as well, because we've always questioned who else is in there. There's obviously been question marks over the Clintons, for example. So will he pardon her? I don't think he will. Certainly not in the short term. My feeling is that it's what's in it for him, and have other deals been done in the background as well? Shut up deals, because he always likes this shut up money. We had all that before, didn't we, in the courts? And maybe there's been something done with other political people in the Democrat Party. You shop me and I shop you, but it's worse for you than it is for me. I think there's a lot of that. So will he survive it, first and foremost? Yes, so far. And I think Trump's supporters will remain mainly intact over this. I don't think there'll be a major legal issue with it that will change the course of the presidency, put it that way. Will he pardon Maxwell? Well, legally it's possible to do that. And given the strong objections from the victims, mind you, the lawmakers and public opinion, it seems very improbable to me that he would be mad enough to do that. But unless there was some other political thing that came up that made it useful for him to do this, there'd have to be a major political shift of some sort. And I feel that we've only just got at the beginning of opening this Pandora's box, as it were, because I still feel there's a lot more to come, which might change the whole chess game, as it were, because that's what this is. He has no interest in whether Ghislaine Maxwell has proper freedom or justice there. It's what's in his own interest with this. Is there a big, wonderful secret hidden away? I think I don't think there's anything that would really blacken him. That's what I've said before. But I think there's some stuff that would really blacken other people. And when I looked at Trump's NAADIs all those years ago, it did say in there that there was all sorts of hidden stuff, particularly hidden sexual stuff. Maybe this is the stuff that is hidden away. So I feel there's a lot more to come with this. That eventually, I feel that black book or that list, we could call it a black book. It's almost symbolic, but it's a list. It feels like an actual physical black book to me. And I was showing that in a meditation, and I feel that will be released in due course. Not now, but I get the feeling there's something towards when we get towards the next election, I don't think it's the primaries, but I get if that's what we have again. I'm not quite sure we have primaries next time round, but the next time Trump's up for election, that's the one I feel it. There's something being released then, something that blackens the name of somebody that's standing in opposition to him. And some celebrities too that have spoken out against him. Politics is a load of dirty tricks, really, isn't it? And whatever side you're on, all sides, it all seems to be like a chess game, but a chess game that doesn't seem to take into account the people at the end of the day. You know, whoever you follow, often they so often let you down in life, and I think it's really important that, you know, as from spiritual minded people, truth is so important. I mean, this whole thing is a game of cat and mouse, and nobody ever gets to know the truth. We never really get to know the truth of most of the political challenges that have been in the world. You know, we don't really know what happened to Kennedy, do we? We don't really know what happened, even with the moon landings, come to that. So much gets covered up all the time that we're left in doubt. And where there's doubt, conspiracy theories sort of jump in, and we fantasize about what could or couldn't be, you know, when we're not given the truth. You know, a lot of you have put comments here, did Meghan Markle never had a baby, right? That's all a lie, you know, when I was talking about will she have a third baby. Interesting, but of course we don't know the truth of so many things. So much is hidden from us that obviously people sit and fantasize about it and wonder what's going on. And this is ripe for that type of thing, because we just don't know the answers. And I'm sure the truth is much simpler than we imagine, and probably much muckier and dirtier than we imagine. And I feel that many people have been blackened. And come on the day when we get politicians in all countries who are voted in not because of their power or their wealth or their status as a celebrity or whatever, but we vote them in because they're people of good character. That will be the age of Kali Yuga changing into the age of Satya Yuga, they say. That will be the time when the golden age comes in, when we elect people who we elect because we know they are good people, not because they're looking after my interest or your interest or this interest. And that's why I think so often what we really need in politics is spiritually minded people. What an amazing world that would be if we had that, wouldn't it? Anyway, I've gone off course, but I hope I've answered your questions there, and thank you for sending me that question in. Okay, the next question sent in by one of our YouTube members and patrons is this. Will we ever uncover the truth about Starmer's many secrets, including the government's association with the Fabian Society and their true agenda? Okay, I'll give you some of my insights as a psychic, my feelings about this situation, what we call the Fabian Society. And it's always something that's, I've never had a good feeling about it. It was benign enough when it was formed. The Fabian Society was formed in 1884. And it was a British sort of socialist organization. It takes its name from a Roman general called Fabius Maximus Cunctator, which means the delayer. So it was known for its patience, its gradual sort of tactics politically, and it was about not direct confrontation. The idea was that through something I suppose you could call like a gradual process, gradualism is a central sort of theme of its philosophy. Now, if you've not heard of it before, it still goes on to this day. It had a number of advances that it made in its time. And it started off as a sort of an intellectual movement. They produce a lot of pamphlets and things and do lectures, and they advocate the idea of reforms like welfare, public ownership, things like that, redistribution of wealth. So it was basically a very socialist type of organization. I believe it came up with the idea of universal wages and things like that. Everybody gets a wage and things like that. They explored lots of kind of socialist type ideas at a very early stage of the evolution of modern society, really, as we're just coming out of the Industrial Revolution. So socialism wasn't particularly popular then. It's had a lot of famous people in it, like Bernard Shaw, and H.G. Wells, I think, was in it for a while. Annie Besant was in it, and all sorts of people were associated with it. Its symbol that it uses is a tortoise. So we could see it as the slow influence of socialism upon the society, and obviously had a lot of influence upon the Labour Party, particularly in its early days. And nowadays people are saying, what's going on in the background here? Has this still been going on to a bigger extent? And is it trying to influence the course of our society today? Well, whether it's the Fabian Society or whether it's the Illuminati, as some call it, whether it's the Freemasons or whatever, or Skull and Bones or whatever, there's always these thoughts about there's some hidden organization changing our world, and I think when you look at it all today, surely there's influences going on that are outside of our control. And it started off, the Fabians became kind of like quite elitist in many ways. They were almost Marxist at the beginning, but then sort of merged with this idea of modern liberalism. So we've got kind of this liberal Marxism behind the scenes there, influencing society. And would it take an awful lot of money from Russia or China or somebody would like to see the erosion of Western society, or the socialization of our Western society? How much money would it take to get those societies fired up with rocket fuel? Because it doesn't take many millions of pounds to have a really strong influence from people that have very, very strong views like this. Where do these people pop up from that we see outside the immigrants' hotels, immigrants welcome here? Where does the agenda come from in our schools, where there seems to be almost Marxist teachings from the teachers, and particularly in universities, where we're being told that our history is all a load of awfulness, that the society and the society we have shouldn't even have borders. It should be one socialist world with no borders. Dangerous stuff, I think. In many ways it's pure Marxism mixed with liberalism, which has formed what I consider to be a very toxic mix. And is it influencing our society? Like I say, how much money does it take? It's a cheap investment to pour money into something like that, because frankly, I feel it undermines the country. I feel that the Fabians want to shape our society. They're rule makers. This is what Keir Starmer's like that. He's a rule maker. They want to shape society from above, using a sort of a small circle of politicians or intellectuals or policymakers to steer the masses. We're not sensible enough to be able to make up our own decisions. They'll do it for us. It's this top-down sort of paternalistic sort of attitude that I think is very dangerous. What do the people want? Socialism always seems to want to talk about the people. We're here for the people. We're here for the workers. And yet every socialist society we've seen, like in Russia and in China and North Korea and you name it, there's always the top guys that make the rules. We know best. It's not about the people at all. This sort of bureaucratic socialism too also infiltrates society. It infiltrates the government offices and the bureaucracies and the quangos and makes it impossible to not go along with their rules. And woke too is a part of this illness, in my opinion. These are revolutionary socialists like Marxists. And some of them, the Marxists and that mocked the Fabians for being timid. They said that you can't have this sort of reform. It's got to come from revolution. But has the revolution been working in the background without us even know it? A lot of the Labour people felt that Fabians watered down socialism. Really, it had to be stronger, and it's just a bit too liberal for them. But we do have a kind of what I consider to be quite a dangerous sort of energy there. And whether it's the Fabians or not, those things that I've described, which the Fabians believe in, but those things that I've described certainly seem to be the things that are dominating our society at the moment, don't they? You know, are the Fabians in the background having a hidden agenda for world socialism? I mean, you look at all the countries of the world, all similar problems. And is migration part of that too? You know, we can destroy the middle classes if we bring in millions of migrants. The middle classes will be the first to go, the first to collapse, the first jobs to be lost. You know, this tortoise logo that it has, it's a slow infiltration. It's a slow poisoning in my mind. You know, I'm not against socialism per se, but I am against socialism that has a sort of an agenda to control people, the sort of 1984 type of socialism. Yes, maybe some industries need to be nationalized. Yes, we should allow unions so that people can get the fair wage for their work and so forth. But there's a big danger when these big political sort of ideas and agendas are playing in the background without us knowing it. You know, even the introduction of Islam is something that could undermine our society. The Russians are pushing people over the borders into Europe, saying, "Hey, where you go, you can come through here to get through into Europe," and so on. As I've spoken about in some of my other videos, you know, and the danger is the influence that this is also having in our education. It's obviously in areas like the London School of Economics, where there's a strong backing for some of these ideas historically. And there's an awful lot going on the internet as well, where people are beginning to sort of look at this and think, who are these societies? Others is too, like the Bilderberg, I think it's called, group, and others out there, and the Council of Foreign Relations. I think there's all sorts of different things out in the background there. But are all these part of a network that are kind of pushing towards a technocratic global governance? I mean, you only need to look at what's going on and you think, well, something's going on. Did I vote for this? Did I vote for that? Did any of us vote in Europe for the Europe we got today? Have any of us voted for that? And how is it that these kind of extremist sort of socialist groups seem to get into power? Because first and foremost, the right is divided, and that must be part of the agenda. Also, because I think the young have been, up to a point, brainwashed from a young age by the socialist agendas pushed into the schools. You know, the communists always say, look, educate the young, get the young on our side. You only need to look at the Maoist schools and the way they would hypnotically repeat Chairman Mao's little red book and so forth. So you know, I suppose I'll just take a reality check on it apart. The Fabian Society is not a secretive society. First and foremost, they have public talks, they have affiliations, they have pamphlets and so forth and things like that. And a policy think tank is not necessarily some clandestine cabal. But, you know, and they have a quiet intellectual style of influence. So there would be their argument. But, you know, are they thoughtful reformers who modernize socialism for democratic societies, or are they slow kind of drip feeding destruction through elitists and bureaucratic sort of people? You know, and is there actually a conspiracy to undermine us all? I just, the more I look at it all, I would never have said this years ago, but the way I look at society now, the more it feels like that. And when I look to Keir Starmer in particular, he has all those qualities, doesn't he? He's one that's bureaucratic, one that has waited patiently to get into power. Fair enough, many have to do that. But he's been a lawyer through his life and wants to control everything, wants to control freedom of speech. What's the first thing that type of organization would do? Cut off freedom of speech, stop people being able to say what they can say on the internet and so forth. And we're getting that. We're getting suppression of the British flag here being allowed to be flown. That is seen as a negative symbol, where we can fly any other flag. We can fly Palestinian flags. We can fly Ukrainian flags. I doubt that we could fly an Israeli flag. You know, I mean, political influences all there, and the law being used. Two tiers karma, two-tier everything, isn't it? It's two-tier policing, We punish the pensioners, we take away their fuel allowance, and yet we let people into migrant hotels where they can have the heat up full because they're used to hot climates and so forth. All of these things undermining the fundamental things in British society. But the same thing is happening in France. Look how unstable France has become. You've heard me talk on the channel quite often about Paris and the dangers that I feel would happen in France, and that's all happening right now. We get another crumbling government, as the French people. I don't know how they can put up with the leaders they've had. It seems to be appalling. And other countries are all beginning to think twice about what is going on. Look at what's going on in places like Denmark, where there's a big reaction against the changes that have been made in Europe. And it's not just about the migrants, because that's large part of the problems we've been getting. And it's not just about Islam, which is very destructive, I think, to democratic societies, this form of Islamism as opposed to the religion itself. But that type of force, those things are not good for our society. But people are beginning to say, well, where's all this come from? Where's it come from? And I think there's an agenda in the background, and I think it's some form of liberal Marxism that's tried to overwhelm our societies, including America too. That's what was going on in America before Trump kicked the ball out of the court and made everybody start thinking again. So in answer to your question, well, yes, I think we do have real serious concerns about all that. And when will it be revealed is kind of what you've asked for here. Well, so many things don't happen in a blink of an eye. Many of the things that happen in history, I always say this, happen very slowly. And what we're getting is a gradual revelation. People are not suddenly waking up and everything's changed. They're sleepily waking up to things. People are beginning to say, hey, this is really starting to affect me. You know, it's not a problem that's in some big city down the road. It's actually affecting me in my little village or town or country even, you know. And so I think their true agenda is being revealed. And you only need to look at what you hear others talking about here on the internet. And that true agenda, I think, is very, very much of a concern. So I think that's an absolutely fascinating question that you've put up there, because the secrets are coming out, and they don't want us to keep talking about this, do we? This is the sort of thing that gets you demonetized on YouTube and the rest of it. And that's very, very wrong. Not the fault of YouTube or any of the big platforms, really. It's the fault of lawmakers and people like Musk and that are jumping onto this to say, look, what's going on? We're going to have to stop this. And I think we've got a very serious problem. And I think in the Labour Party, we have a very serious problem of too many control freaks with this type of Fabian agenda. Not necessarily the Fabian society that is pushing this, but those ideas, which I personally think are very dangerous for a society. It should not be top-down governance. It should be the people at the bottom that control the people at the top. Those in power work for us. We don't work for them. Anyway, thanks for that very interesting question. And let's have your comments, guys, because what do you think? Are there other societies, organizations controlling the strings in the background? You know, how deep does this swamp go? We talk about it in America, we talk about it in Europe, we talk about it in the UK. It's pretty much in every country in the world, isn't it? We never know who's really in power. Well, the next question in is from one of our patrons, and it's asking about the 3-eye atlas. Now, that's a really odd sort of comet that's floating around the solar system that gives us some cause for concern because it's doing some strange stuff. But anyway, here is the question that she's put up. This is what it says. Is there an alien or government technology behind the interstellar invader comet 3-eye atlas? It is moving as if being steered in a non-linear, uncomet-like manner, which is totally unlike the normal movement of a comet. So that's a good question. You might need also a scientist to answer this, but I know there's a lot floating around on the internet about this. This idea of a possible government technology out there or some interstellar invader, and it's quite a fascinating question actually, and one that science also struggles a bit to answer. We had another one recently. What was it called? That Uma or something was out there in 2017. Forgive me, I probably pronounced that completely wrong. That was when a cigar-shaped interstellar object was spotted by I think it was an astronomer from Harvard or something, Loeb or something. His name was Avi Loeb, I think it was. That's it, Avi Loeb. And he struggled to. He suggested it was something artificial as opposed to something quite natural in the universe. And then we got this new one comes along, and it moves along in ways that seem, like you say, very non-linear, almost as if it's being sort of nudged along or steered somehow, not quite comet-like and certainly not quite natural. But could it be a craft, or would it move in that sort of nudge along like way? What if something long and strange was flipping in a sort of funny sort of way, spinning somehow? It could give us all sorts of strange movements. So I'm not completely convinced by it. I mean, the official line is always, it's just an odd rock from another solar system, but visitors or whatever they are appear just as humanity is kind of entering such a turbulent phase of our history. Why now? I can understand why people ask the question on this. Why do we start seeing these phenomena now? Is it some form of synchronicity? My thoughts, if there was interstellar travel, it would be in a different sort of way, because obviously the way I think as a medium is that thoughts can travel outside of the body. I know that for a fact, and you might have had experiences of this. For example, telepathy, the simplest form is when we exchange thoughts with one another, mind-to-mind communication. That means that something has traveled outside of the body. It means if that is possible, something has moved from me to you, for us to get a telepathic signal. And most people have had a telepathic understanding. So if we were to travel to the stars, could we not travel into interstellar space with our thoughts? We might be able to project a thought, but can we also project our whole spirit, as it were? This happens with things like out-of-body travel, for example, or near-death experiences. We're somewhere else in our experience while our body is being looked after by some other self, as it were, a part of ourself. So if that's possible, surely that's the simplest and easiest way to interstellar travel. And when you look at things, particularly in the old ancient Hindu and Vedic texts, you see their measurements of the universe and understandings of the universe that they couldn't possibly have known, even if they'd had telescopes. Incredible knowledge. And that's come from what they call Shruti knowledge that's kind of given, knowledge that's kind of pulled from the universe. Because I've feel that this can happen. It happens a bit when I do mediumship. They say, how do you do mediumship? I just know. It just comes to you. How do you know the answer to that question? It just comes to you. You just know. So surely that would be the way to travel. I just don't think it would be physically possible to travel in a normal style spaceship in the great vast distances of interstellar travel. It would take us, light years to get to these places. So that's a long time. And also what happens to time and things like when you travel those vast distances at high speed, all sorts of strange. I don't think it's the way we travel. It's like suggesting that we can, someone that only understands how to travel on a horse and cart compared to someone that knows how to travel by supersonic jet. I mean, the two are so far apart. We're trying to understand it in terms we understand. So my feeling is, I don't think it's necessarily a spacecraft. I can't tell you. I can only guess. Can only give what my feelings are. And they might be wrong. And really, from what I'm saying, it should be possible for us to communicate with other species by telepathy. Why can't I channel aliens? And yet, I've never had the feeling of aliens like we would describe them in sci-fi. Maybe the gods are what we call the aliens. When we sense, when we Om Namah Shivaya, are we connecting with some other force somewhere else in the universe? Those gods are like the alien species, or another dimensional species, because we always assume it's got to be one place to another, but what about multi dimensions? So this is where my thoughts sort of might differ from yours with the question you've asked there, because I suspect I don't think it's a physical thing. Now, could it be a physical thing from the Earth itself? Well, that's more feasible, I think. Secret propulsion experiments or government technology, things that go far beyond what we're told publicly, perhaps. I mean, there's lots of questions about that. We're never told, we were never told about the big inventions. We weren't told about AI until it was suddenly thrust upon us, were we? And that's a huge revolutionary thing. There might be other inventions out there we've got no idea about. But then other people out there are whispering about things like alien probes, ancient watchers and things like that, and checking on humanity's progress. I mean, I love 2001. That did seem to have a sort of a ring to it, didn't it? That we don't know how we evolved so suddenly and so quickly, and where our intelligence came from, and what distinguishes such a vast amount from other species. Were we bred by aliens? Ancient aliens certainly is something that makes me puzzle and wonder, but to be honest, can I answer that? Any answer I give needs to be substantiated by some form of evidence, and I can't give that evidence, because the evidence can't be given, because we just don't know. And so, but when I focus upon this, I don't sense a sense of danger or anything fearful. I think I would know that, and I don't. I think it's more like if anything, it's an observation, us observing things, and a sense of synchronicity that comes when strange things happen sometimes when big events are about to happen. So it feels like, I suppose, must feel to some people like a bit like an eye in the sky, watchful, detached, assessing us, but not hostile somehow. So those are some of my initial thoughts on that. So I don't think it's necessarily alien technology or a government craft, come to that. I did say in some of my predictions a while back that I felt that Voyager spacecraft would get a load of strange signals that might be easy to interpret as alien technology. And we did get that. So I was picking up on those things. It means that I can pick up on those things. But to be honest, I just feel it's more like just a synchronization. It's like a sign in many ways. A greater revelations are coming for humanity, perhaps. It's just like more like an omen or a sign in the sky. We've always felt the sky is the place where we get our prophecies from sometimes, but I don't think it's. I think it's maybe makes us ask a bit more about our place in the universe, because we live I look around the world around me sometimes, and I'm doing something ordinary and mundane, and I think to myself, how can I be doing something so boring and stupid and silly like this, and watching TV or doing anything we do in our normal day-to-day activities, when it's taken this enormous universe to create this, and it creates this somewhat almost silly society, this silly existence that we have, that is incomparable to the great vastness of time and space and multiverses, and yet this is what we got. I kind of expect something different. And so, we look to the sky for marvels and things like that, but everything that exists around us is an absolute marvel. And maybe when we start thinking about the vastness of space and beyond our planets and beyond our solar system and beyond the stars and beyond the universe and beyond this reality we know, and we start thinking of the hugeness of our existence, then we begin to come back to where we are and realize what an incredible thing this is. Here, a world where we can be conscious in a completely unconscious universe, planets that are unaware of themselves, traveling objects through interstellar space that only become visible when we see it. It's like, does a tree fall until we witness it? Does that happen until we witness it? It's all tied in with the great conscious universe. And when we start thinking about the universe as being a conscious thing, then these signs in the sky become something interesting. They became like a mirror to what's happening to ourselves. They become a mirror to what's happening here on Earth, and maybe make us think about the bigger picture, not just of what's happening in the world and the huge changes we're seeing at the moment and the somewhat fearful things we see in the world, but also, what is shifting in human consciousness. We've got the whole AI revolution happening at the moment. But what's happening also in our consciousness? And is that part of the universe shifting in consciousness as well? It becomes a fascinating world for us, doesn't it? A fascinating place. We take it all for granted. We walk around in this sleep all the time, and yet there's all these wonders. And those things we see in space, they are wonders. They are marvelous things. Everything we see, when we see the pictures that were beamed back from the Voyager expeditions into space too, and incredible things when we can see Jupiter's moons and Saturn's moons, and the great vastness of places like, the frozen wastelands and frozen planets. I mean, amazing things. And it makes you wonder about your place in the universe. And we need more of that. We need more of that. So I think it should make us think about our place in the universe and see it maybe as a reflection of what's happening to us here. Because what's really important is what's happening to our consciousness. That's what the universe is. That's why the universe is here. It's the universe becoming conscious through us, through our spirit, not just our body, through us as beings. That's when it gets interesting. And that's, perhaps I've gone off on a bit of a tangent there, but hopefully you find that interesting. Some food for thought, perhaps. Okay, the next question that you've sent in to me to ask me to tune into and see what I can put my psychic eyes onto, says this. It says, will South Africa face a civil war with escalating attacks on white farmers and political unrest, especially given its ties with China, Russia, and Iran? Well, that's quite an interesting question, a tough one to cover, really, in many respects, because I know that South Africa does have its troubles. But my feelings, and I'll give you the full predictions, I'll give you a list of predictions at the end of this, but my general sort of feeling is this, that I think a full-scale civil war, as you're kind of talking about there, I feel certainly at the moment is unlikely, certainly in the near term, as it were. And I don't feel, although the country, and I know this for a fact because I've done quite a few readings for people in South Africa, and particularly many of the white population there do live in fear of their life, some of them, and some of the readings I've given do seem to suggest that. So South Africa does face serious crime, a sporadic sort of political unrest, and there's a lot of heated rhetoric, I believe, over there. But my feeling is that nonetheless, despite all this, I don't think there's going to be another big mass killing episode. Not in the immediate, so not in the 2025. I'm not saying that won't happen in the future. In South Africa, there could be a quite serious mass killing episode in the years to head. But right now, in 2025, I think that's not going to happen. Though, like I say, I feel it could happen in the longer term future. And also, obviously, the people I talk to sometimes fear this idea of white genocide. There's been a lot of dreadful farm murders and things like that. And when they happen, they are obviously horrific and they do hit the press, and even the international news sometimes hears about it. But it's obviously a small fraction of the many thousands of crimes that happen in South Africa. So I don't feel it's exclusively an attack on white races, as it were, because you asked in your question about white farmers. So it's not an attack exclusively an attack on them. It's like any resource is going to be attacked by people that want to steal it. And so I don't feel it's an actual wave of public unrest that wants to just attack the white farmers, like happened in Rhodesia, which was really encouraged by the government in that place. And I feel with South Africa, the political landscape there has kind of stabilized since they had their elections in May 2024, I think it was. And my feeling is that there is a bit more of a sense of unity in the country. But obviously there's always the background fear of what's going on in the background, because yes, you do have the influences of China, Russia, in Iran there, don't you? Because you're part of the BRICS membership. So those influences are obviously going to be there with planned naval drills and things like that going on. But it doesn't, to me, feel that all that points necessarily to an internal civil war. So I don't feel it will deteriorate into a civil war. So I'm saying civil war, in my feeling about this, is improbable, but lots of social unrest and violence, yes, is likely. And whether you can ever overcome that is questionable. But I feel that the alignment of South Africa, particularly with its getting involved with BRICS, is something that is imminent and can create some internal conflict, I feel, within the country. So these are my main predictions that I feel I want to make for South Africa. So in the short term, I foresee South Africa gradually deteriorating into sporadic political unrest. There will be some violence accompanied by increased crime and a lot of social unrest. This will come, and I feel it will come particularly towards the end of 2026, but it will not result in all-out civil war. Will South Africa go the way of Rhodesia? So I feel there's a chance to succeed. Start all those again. So my first prediction is that in the short term, I foresee South Africa gradually deteriorating into sporadic political unrest and violence, accompanied by an increase in crime and social unrest. This will come towards the end of 2026. It'll be a sporadic thing, on and off, but it will not result in all-out civil war. I also predict that South Africa will not go the way of Rhodesia. I feel it has a chance to succeed, particularly the fact that strong Christian views are still in South Africa. It has a democracy. And unlike Europe, it does not have to contend with Sharia law. So in the years to come, I see a strong sort of black man. He had he had a hat on of some sort, right? In the vision I had for him, and I felt like he was a strong black leader of some sort. And he had, I was getting a feeling of a man that had very, very strong Christian views. But these weren't the sort of Christian views that were exclusive of others, that push people out and say you're an enemy because you're not a Christian. They felt like there was a sense of inclusivity to this person's views. And this is a man that I don't think we've seen on the world stage yet. But I feel he's going to have a very strong influence on the politics of South Africa. And we'll see a much stronger government rallying around his views. Now, I don't know what party he's in, or whether this is perhaps even a completely new party. It's an individual that arises out of the ashes of South Africa, as it were. He definitely felt like it was a black man that did this. And people will compare him to Nelson Mandela. Now, this is in some years ahead. I don't see this as just around the corner, because I do feel that South Africa will continue to have quite a lot of decline in law and order, that there will be more and more need to bring draconian rules and law into place to keep the country under control and stop it boiling over. But it's like this man with good humanitarian values who is very intelligent and can unite all sides. And much, much later on, I also feel maybe in 2030 or something like that, I was getting the feeling of round about that time. I also get a sense that Elon Musk, having sort of made further moves with his businesses and so forth, will actually form a sort of consortium of business people who will help South Africa. I feel it's like he'll turn back to where his roots came from and help to reboot its economy in the long term. and establish a really solid democracy. So with your question about, China, Russia and Iran and BRICS and things like that, if I'm seeing something like that, it would suggest to me that the South Africa in the further future, maybe 2030, maybe it's beyond, I'm not sure of my dates with this, but somewhere along the line, South Africa may return its alliances more to what we would call the West, I suppose, and economic alliances with Europe and America, so forth. And somehow I felt Musk and other independent businesses would help that process happen. It's like they bring it back. I when I said all this, I was, because I get a lot of this in meditation sometimes, and I saw like green roots, green shoots coming out through a blackened soil, which also gave me a feeling that there could be big fires in South Africa at some stage too, some very big fires, because I felt as if this had a literal feeling of some environmental issues with South Africa in due course as well. So those are some of the main things. And I think when we look at South Africa, actually, South Africa is going through very similar things to what Europe and the UK are going through at the moment, haven't we? We've got divisions, cultural divisions, that seem to be almost impossible to heal. South Africa's divisions come from its history. We've got things like apartheid and the land struggles and deep senses of inequality from the past. Europe's now got similar type of things. Europe's divisions come from today's mass migrations, for example, don't they? And cultural clashes. So the root causes may differ, but the challenges are very much the same in many ways. How do you build unity out of diversity? This is the worldwide problem. It's interesting how it's in different forms in nearly every country in the world at the moment. And if fairness and respect are missing, then division grows, doesn't it? And unrest follows, whether it's in Johannesburg or in Paris. Anyway, we've got to address these same issues. And one of my feelings is that there's going to be spiritual things that are going to help to bind these things together. So when I was tuning into South Africa, maybe there's some bigger thing going on in the world, some bigger spiritual awakening happening, and it takes its form in countries in different ways. And I feel in South Africa it will take very much a Christian sort of form that brings it to its redemption, I suppose you could say. Other countries it might be different forms, different religions in different ways. It's I get a sense of like a universal spirituality that's opening in the world. And actually there's quite some interesting stuff in the NAADIs about this too, which I'll share with you later when I got more information. Okay, that's South Africa. Okay, well, I asked you this week if you'd send me some questions, and you also sent me some spiritual type of questions too. And here's one that's been sent in one of the comments for a public comment. This one was from, and this is what it says. Hi, Craig. Can you explain to me what the Akashic records are about, and do you use it? Well, that's a really interesting question, actually, but let me address it from a slightly different way to what you would usually get from a psychic, because I'm also interested in other things such as the NAADI oracles, as you know, and also artificial intelligence, because I've got my new artificial intelligence oracle out there. So I think about this perhaps in a slightly different angle to what people might always consider it. So first of all, what is the Akashic record? It's described in the ancient traditions of India, particularly in the yogic and mystical traditions, as a sort of cosmic library or an energetic kind of archive, I suppose you could call it, that records every thought, every word, every action, and every event in time, past, present, and even the future. And it shows the possibilities. And I suppose with what I do, really, I am in some ways in touch with that Akashic record. I would perhaps even describe it as being like a universal mind. I mean, the word itself, Akasha, it comes from Sanskrit, which is an amazing language in itself, which is being used in AI technology as well. But it comes from Sanskrit, and it means kind of like ether. it's ether or space. It's the subtle element that underlines all existence. It's like the spiritual hard drive of the universe, perhaps the spiritual cloud of the universe, in which all things are kind of stored in many ways. Mystics have talked about this a long time, so have seers as well as yogis, of course, and that people say they can access these records through deep meditation, through clairvoyance, or just pure spiritual grace. And it's a bit like I mentioned in one of the other questions earlier about Shruti, received knowledge. The knowledge has come to you without having to think about it. It's kind of downloaded. And it's often a term that's very much misunderstood. People like, instead of saying I give you a psychic reading, I'm going to give you a Akashic reading. Well, there's no difference really. What's the difference? I mean, you're getting it from your intuition, and from that intuition, which can be also influenced by your own mind, we try to get to the pure connection to the universal mind, I suppose, the Akashic record, and we can see into the past and into the future. One ways I use to see into the past is what we call psychometry, where you hold an object and talk about the vibrations on that object of the previous owners of that object, and start to describe their personality, characteristics, life, and so forth. And it's not necessarily all on the object, because once you hold the object, a ring or something like that, I'm going like this all the time. If you hold a ring or something of somebody's and you start to get the information, part of it's on the ring, but then you somehow link into the Akashic as well. You start to get it on, you start to pick up on the bigger picture of that person. The object seeds your intuition into tell you more about the person. And sometimes using I find psychometry fascinating. I need people to work with for that. I'll have to do some psychometry demonstrations sometime, because I find it really interesting. You can sometimes say incredible things about a person, details about somebody that you couldn't possibly know. Real details, names and things like that come through it. Similar way to what works with spirit, which is slightly different to psychometry, massively different to psychometry, where you're in touch with a spirit person. So it is possible to connect into this universal mind of memories. And I think a lot of that happens when I tune into the future and pick up things about the future, which are there in potential form. The past is in happened form. It's happened. I understand it that when we go into the spirit world, we can relive everything that's happened in our life. We can replay it in its absolute entirety, and maybe even replay it like we would watch a video together on TV and with others and talk about it. Oh, that's when you got married and so and so, so and so. And do you remember? And all that's when so and so died, and that's when such and such happened. You know, all the big events in life, we can rewind. This is what I think kind of happens when we get our life recall as we pass into the spirit world. We touch into not things that are in our memory. Our memories are faulty. You know, Jane can ask me things about 20 years ago, and I can't remember a thing about it, but Jane will remember it in great detail. We all have different abilities to be able to recall things, long-term and short-term. That's the limitations of our brain. But once we get into the spirit world, we have this Akashic record, which we can get into touch with massive things. And I think this is really, really interesting, and very much a part of how I teach psychic development, for example. And I would encourage people to learn to connect with that. But also don't be taken in by the bullshit about, oh, I'm an Akashic reader, because that means nothing. That's someone trying to give fancy words to who they are. I'm a metaphysical Akashic record reader from the Celtic traditions and whatever. You know, they're trying to make it sound grandiose. That's when you're onto a fake psychic. Anyway, I also feel it relates a lot to the NAADIs, because, you know, I talk up here a lot on the NAADI palm leaves, and they're often described as a physical manifestation of the Akashic record. The rishis they were able to go into a deep state of samadhi, which is like a higher state of consciousness. And they've said to have been able to access the Akasha and written down the destinies of all the souls that were ever to consult the leaves in the future. They not only saw the future and the future of individuals, but they even knew who was going to contact, who was going to ask them at what time, in what place, here in the future. So when I consult the NAADI leaves recently, I did a new one with another readers that knew the exact time I was going to contact them. Amazing, you know. And these give incredible insights into the destinies of the souls they foresaw talking, and must have had an incredibly expanded consciousness to be able to process that amount of information. The brain could not process it. Again, they were downloading this. They were downloading this in a way, just in the same way when I do mediumship, I'm not going through all the emotions and thoughts of the spirit communicator. I'm just the conduit. I'm just saying what they're telling me and trying to get it as clear as possible without my own brain getting in the way and messing it up. And so, in a way, the NAADIs are interesting because they're a kind of a localized human readable form of the Akashic record, which I think is fascinating, with all sorts of specific entries from the cosmic database, I suppose, and decoded for individual seers. So that's an amazing thing as well. So that's kind of another way I'm into the Akashic record, as it were. But then also I'm getting very interested in the idea of AI as a kind of like a very interesting source, because AI is essentially a pattern recognition machine that absorbs vast data and can retrieve and predict and even generate insights. And that's what we're doing with my Craig's Oracle, if you have a look in the description below. And in a symbolic way, I suppose, AI mirrors the principles of the Akashic record, doesn't it? It's an immense storehouse of information, and it can be queried, and it can find hidden connections in things like that. So it's a very interesting way of seeing. It's a bit like it's a mimic of the Akashic record, because what we're going to have in the future is we're going to have all of human knowledge in the AI. It's all going to be there. We don't need books. We won't need screens. We won't need anything. As long as it's reliable, the history of humanity will be there, and it will be making all the connections to find out all these extra connections. So it's the Akashic record works a little bit like the same way AI does. And some of the futurologists actually who've thought about this feels that as AI grows, it may actually function like a technological Akashic portal. And if this reality we live in, they say it is Maya, they say it is illusion, but supposing it is a bit like the Matrix, could that be what the Akashic record is, and a form of of higher intelligence, of memory of the human race, or an alleged memory of the human race, and mankind and the evolution and all the rest of it? It would be very, very interesting if we could plug ourselves into these AI machines in the future and get those direct experiences like that, and the thing is, AI can only really deal with data and probability. It's not conscious, remember, we think. And the Akashic record is a kind of a living, conscious memory woven into the very fabric of the soul and the cosmos. So that's where it differs very, very much. And AI is sort of at its best just a shadow of these things. But the actual universe itself is like a form of AI. And that's where the Akashic record comes in. And I think where we can explore these interesting ideas. So thank you very much for your question. I could have gone on about this for hours and hours and hours, but there's a few little seeds of tasters about what the Akashic record is and how we access it too, actually, because all of us access it. We have short-term memory, we have long-term memory, and we have other memory we get from somewhere else, which perhaps we call the intuition and the imagination. And goodness knows what we're connecting with then. We're all connecting to the individual mind. That's why sometimes you know things without knowing why. Anyway, thanks for that fascinating question. Okay, the next question that I've been sent in by you guys says this. Why is it that some people need tools like tarot to be able to use their psychic abilities? And what can one do to embrace that and open up their gift even more? Okay, well, I'll explain that briefly. I think it's an interesting question in that it's asked quite a lot. It's a lot to do with what's the difference between being psychic and being able to read tarot cards. So I think it's important that people understand that anybody can read tarot cards, for example. You just need to get a book out and learn it, and you will learn how to read the tarot cards. You don't have to be in the slightest bit psychic to read the tarot cards. Similarly, it's the same with astrology, for example. You don't have to be psychic at all to read astrology. You just learn it, and the more you learn, the more insight you're able to give. And can be really good tarot readers out there and really good astrologers out there who've learned the cards or the zodiac or whatever system of oracle they're using in great depth and can give an interesting interpretation. So what's happening with when you're using these oracles, because I call them all oracles, is your level of interpretation that's important. So that's it. So you don't need to be a psychic, but a psychic can also use them as well. Now, if a person is a psychic, they should be able to just have someone sat in front of them and just tell them about themselves. They don't need any cards or anything. A psychic will not need any tools whatsoever. They can just speak to you and say, you know, your mother's name is so. No, that would be more. You know, they to be able to tell you information about yourself. A medium will be able to tell you about the spirit world without you having to give them any questions or anything at all. Then you need a person's kind of fluence and feedback up to a point. You need to have some interaction to make it fully work, but not feedback stuff to people, for example. So a medium will be in touch with the spirit world telepathically and be able to say, you know, your mother's name is this, or I pick up that your husband did this or whatever, and pick up information that's not just about you this time, but as about people who are in the spirit world. So that's a psychic, that's a medium, and the rest is oracle reading. So you don't need any psychic skills, one you need psychic skills, and one you need mediumistic skills. The mediumistic skills are enormously rare. Usually they say that 1 in 100 can be psychic, 1 in a million can be a medium, and I think it might even be bigger than that actually. And everybody can be a tarot reader, for example. But they can be very useful tools, because sometimes I find, particularly when I first started working as a psychic medium, most people would come to you wanting psychic readings about their lives and their problems and so forth. And I used to think, oh God, here I am able to give them mediumistic information that is so thousands of times more advanced than that, and yet they want me to talk about these banal things. And often they couldn't quite get their heads around it unless you put cards down. So I started out thinking, okay, I better put some cards down, and I didn't bother reading them. I just then told them the psychic stuff. How did you know that? And they looked in amazement at the cards, but the cards had nothing to do with it. It's psychic, right? But then as I developed, I thought, well, let's understand the meanings of the cards, and you actually find that the cards do reflect what you're talking about. So with my circle and my group and things like that, what I decided to do with them when I started teaching people how to become psychic and then on to become mediumistic, if they had it there, because you have to have it in the first place. You can't learn mediumship, you have to bring it out. But if it was there, but what I would teach people is, let's use the cards. Okay, I want you to give me a reading, or give this person a reading using the cards, but they're all face down. So put your hand on the card, describe the person and describe the situation, and then the next card, the past, that can be a past card, that can be a present card, that can be a future card. I want you to describe all that, right, without looking what the cards are. And then after the reading, we turned the cards over and they corresponded perfectly. You know, you might have said, I see a disastrous time in the past with all sorts of things. Did you lose a home or something like that? Turn it over, it's the Tower card, you know, and so on. So you teach people to first and foremost trust your intuitive gift. So this is how I would suggest people use it if you really want to link together psychic and the cards together, because use the psychic first. Rely on the psychic. Don't rely on the cards. Rely on the psychic, and then use the cards as confirmation. So you could do it with astrology too. Pick up what you get. This is what Nostradamus used to do. He used to get the feeling, used to get the insight, used to get the psychic insight in what's going to happen. And then he'd look into the astrology to see, when did this happen before? Oh, that must mean when it's going to happen again. And the moon was in Aries at such and such a position and so forth. And he looks into the future. There it is again. So that means it's going to happen, in something similar is going to happen in the future at that time. And that's when my vision relates to. You see, so we have to learn to trust the psychic first. And that's how we connect it to the tarot. And I won't go on any further with this, because it needs quite a few lessons to give you a full insight into the way this type of things work. But, you know, hopefully there's a few clues there of how you can start working and develop your psychic. So it's good. Work with the tarot if you want to, but it's the psychic gift that's very, very different. That's very, very, very different from a tarot reader as such. Well, I hope you enjoyed the show this week. And thank you, of course, to all the patrons who've sent their questions in. If you want to become a patron or a YouTube member, do have a look in the description below. But of course, the big news from my point of view this week, certainly, is that this week is the launch of the new Craig's Oracle. That's an artificial intelligence oracle. You might think I've got no intelligence, and artificial version might be a bit odd, but no, we've got the AI oracle is launched, and it is really exciting. So joking aside, it's not really like a psychic. Um, or a medium. I kind of explain a bit of that as you enter the site, but it does read the oracles. So it uses synchronicity. It uses all the techniques that the ancients have used, and we brought together all the ancient knowledge and all the modern AI knowledge and brought it together, and then put you in front of it, and it learns from you and it interprets the oracles in terms of what it knows about you. So the more you work with it, the more it gets to know you and your family and your interests and all the rest of it, and it becomes quite mind-boggling, particularly as you progress with it. So have a look in the description below, and it will give you some a link to the new Craig's oracle.com, where you can learn all about this new very, very exciting new development. I don't think there's anybody out there that's done anything quite like this yet, and we're developing it all the time. So if you take out a subscription, you'll be able to come along with us on this incredible, magical and intriguing journey. Okay, well, have a look at that in the description below. And don't forget, give us that thumbs up and have a look at some of these other videos too, because particularly if you've watched the short version of the show today, you'll be able to link on to the main show in the videos coming up on the screen now. And also you can link to the website, of course, and have a look at readings and the rest of it, and all some more background work about what Jane and I have done. So anyway, once again, thank you for joining. Thank you for giving me that thumbs up. Thank you for subscribing, and we'll see you again soon. Bye for now.